Thank you. And Randy, thank you for that extraordinary introduction. It is an extreme pleasure for me to be here tonight, back in the Midwest, at this unbelievable event with the great people of the state of Iowa. Thank you. Tonight, I want to speak with you about the fight for the soul of our republic. I want to talk with you about what we are fighting for, as well as how we are to fight. Before I go any further, however, I want to deal with the elephant in the room, or shall I say, the donkey in the room. What, you may be asking, is a porn star lawyer doing here tonight to speak with you about our party and our republic? So let me tell you what I'm doing here tonight. In normal times, I would not be here. I would be back in Los Angeles enjoying my life. But these are anything but normal times. I was born to a modest family, and I grew up not far from here in St. Louis, Missouri. At age 12, I started working a variety of jobs because my parents taught me the idea of honest work for honest pay and a strong work ethic. I mowed lawns in the summer for our neighbors, and I shoveled their snow in the winter. I worked at a grocery store stocking produce. I umpired Little League baseball games in the summer. I even drove a Massey Ferguson tractor and sometimes a John Deere. I was the first in my family to graduate college, and I have since become a very fortunate man. And if these were normal times, I would be someplace else tonight enjoying my good luck. But a strange thing happened to me this year. A very strange thing. I was handed a client who'd been wronged by the President of the United States. Headline writers only know her by her occupation, but I have come to know Stormy Daniels as someone with incredible integrity, compassion, and a fight for the truth. And in the course of our fight for justice for Stormy, something remarkable happened. Americans of all stripes came to us and opened their hands and began to provide us with information. And soon, although it was unexpected, I found myself face to face opposite the most powerful man in the United States, the President of the United States. Fighting not only for Stormy, but for many other women. Fighting not only for Stormy, but others in the United States that felt disadvantaged by this cruel and unusual president. Now, I'm not exactly a stranger to politics. When I was in my 20s trying to figure out how I was going to pay for college and law school, I worked on over 120 Democratic campaigns in over 30 states of this great nation. In fact, I had the privilege to work in this great state in 1994 in connection with Bonnie Campbell's run for governor of the state of Iowa. Now, after that time, I never thought that I would be involved in politics again. And I certainly never thought that I would have the great privilege of standing here tonight before a crowd like this at the Wingding. But the Trump presidency has galvanized me, as it has galvanized many of you and millions of other Americans. It has caused me to ask, how can I step up? And it has reminded me of something that I learned long ago in school. You see, when our founding fathers founded this great nation, they never in a million years imagined. No, what they imagined was that ordinary citizens, people like many of you, people like me, would step up when called to serve the greater good. And when their duty was done, they would go back to their lives, go back to the lives they had left in order to serve. Now, I don't know how I will step up, but I do know that if I am called, as I know many of you feel, that you too will step up like I will. Because the moment we are living in is grave. It is critical. Let me be clear. Trump doesn't have the character, the heart, the knowledge, or the wisdom to be president of the United States of America. Now, there was a time shortly after the election in 2016 that I hoped, that I prayed, that the office would change the man. We now know that the man has changed the office. What we Democrats are fighting for now is nothing short than the survival of our republic. Our families, our children, our neighbors, and our cities. What we are fighting for is the ability of people to have a good paying job, pay their health care expenses, send their kids to college, and have a real shot at a real American dream. What we are fighting for is Roe versus Wade. Equal pay, equality, women's rights, and gay rights. This is what we are fighting for. And what are we fighting against? A man that wants to turn back the hands of time, to send us into the dark ages. A man who wants more deregulation, more filthy air and slimy rivers, more disregard for the downtrodden, the disabled, the disadvantaged, disregard for women and minorities, and yet more billions for billionaires. A man who will put the balance of the Supreme Court, if reelected, at 7-2, who will choose the strong over the weak, corporations over people, and old men with ideas about women's bodies over women themselves. Now, among us Democrats in this room tonight, nothing that I have said is very controversial. We are nearly united on many, if not all, of these issues. We are united as to what we should be fighting for. But we often seem to be a party divided as to how we should fight. I, however, believe that there is no greater question facing our party and our nation than the question of how. Because this president, no matter how corrupt or immoral he may be, he knows how to fight. He may be the worst president in American history, but he also beat 17 highly qualified opponents, including many smart candidates, each of whom told us how bad he would be. Why or how? Because he is a fighter. What I fear for this Democratic Party that I love so much is that we have a tendency to bring nail clippers to a gunfight. Tonight, however, I want to suggest a different course. I believe that our party, the Democratic Party, must be a party that fights fire with fire. I believe that we can no longer be the party that turns the other cheek. We must be the party that marshals the power of law and government to strike back at those that strike our cheek and to bring those to justice. When they go low, I say, we hit harder. Now, I know that some of you in this room may disagree with me. The answer to Donald Trump, you may say, is to do just the opposite of Donald Trump. Be noble, be kind, be classy. And I am all for each of those things. But tonight, with our country under an unprecedented assault by a con man who fights only for himself and degrades the vulnerable and the powerless and regular hardworking people day in and day out, I believe that we must honestly ask ourselves whether those that we fight for can afford our gentleness. Now, there is no question that we are the party of love in America, of loving thy neighbor, of loving whomever you want to love, of policies that extend a loving hand to those in between jobs, down on their luck, those who are suffering and frail and without support. But here's what I believe. When you're fighting for the values of love, you cannot afford to fight lovingly. If you want peace, prepare for war, the old Latin saying goes. And in that spirit, I say this: if we want a more inclusive, tolerant, compassionate, welcoming, gracious, and merciless America, we must be willing to do battle to achieve it. If we want the American dream for ourselves, our families, our neighbors, our children, and each other, we must leave it all on the field every day and fight for it. Here is what I believe the Democratic Party is. In the eternal battle of David versus Goliath, we are the party of Davids. We are the party of people who want to live their lives, chase their dreams, do their jobs, raise their children, leave the world a little better than they found it. And so often, they find themselves up against Goliaths. They find themselves up against employers who don't treat them right. They find themselves up against an economy rigged so all of the profits and the froth go to a chosen few. They find themselves up against a cruel immigration policy that seeks to throw out people who have spent their lives in the United States trying to build a better life for themselves and their children. They find themselves up against racism and sexism and bigotry. We are the party of Davids. Davids come in black and Davids come in white. Davids are Asian and Latino and Arab. Davids speak English and Davids speak Spanish. Davids are men, and Davids are women, and Davids are gay, and Davids are straight. Davids are everyone who works a job that makes their hands or their feet hurt. There are many Davids in this great state of Iowa. Davids are people that never ask for a handout, but who do need a helping hand when the world changes and they find themselves without a job. Davids are people who don't get enough hours anymore and struggle to figure out a way to find daycare for their children. Davids are parents who want to give their children a better life than they've had, but who, in Trump's America, can't figure out how. Yes, we are the party of Davids. And when you are the party of Davids, you cannot afford to show up without a slingshot. You know, we trial lawyers get a bad name, and some of us deserve it. But I can stand here today and say with pride that I'm not just some TV lawyer. I've been fighting for the Davids versus the Goliaths for 18 years, my entire career. For 18 years, I've represented people who found themselves on the wrong side of power. People like Stormy Daniels. I have battled con men and fraudsters in some of the world's largest corporations that hurt people that didn't have the means to fight back. I have fought on behalf of Jewish families who learned that their loved ones' remains had been dug up and put in a mass grave here on U.S. soil because a publicly traded cemetery company wanted to squeeze more plots into the cemetery so they could make more money. I have fought on behalf of first responders, nurses, and doctors who put their lives on the line to treat those with HIV and Ebola. But they didn't know one thing, that the surgical gowns they were wearing were defective and placing their lives at risk. Why? Because the multinational corporation that manufactured them had shipped the manufacturing to Honduras in order to make more money, had placed their lives at risk, and never bothered to tell them. And most recently, I have fought on behalf of dozens of families who came to the United States seeking a better life, only to have the government steal their children from them, separate them, in many cases lose them, all in an effort for Donald Trump and Stephen Miller to send a message to the rest of the world. Don't you dare come to America, because if you do, this could happen to you, and you could be. This is not our America. Now, what have I learned over the last 18 years battling Goliaths on behalf of Davids? I have learned that Goliaths never voluntarily do the right thing. They don't voluntarily provide justice. They don't roll over and do the right thing. No, what I have learned is if you want justice on behalf of Davids, you have to fight for it, and you have to bring Goliaths to justice, period. It's not easy, but it is the only way. So when you're fighting on behalf of regular, hardworking people, day in and day out, as us Democrats are prone to do, you cannot be shy about fighting. You must own it and never look back. But let me also say this. In the age of Donald Trump, despite the dumpster fire that is his presidency, and it is quite the dumpster fire, isn't it? We cannot simply be a party that fights against. We must also fiercely fight for Davids. We Democrats must fight to put Americans back to work in good-paying jobs and put those who have stopped. We Democrats must fight to make college affordable for every single American. This is the greatest country on earth, and no American should ever forgo education because it is too expensive. We Democrats must fight for Medicare for all. Our soldiers do not leave a man or a woman behind on the battlefield, and we should not leave any man, woman, or child behind when it comes to taking care of their health care in the United States of America. Democrats must fight to finally ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Control to the United States of America. We must invest in our public school teachers who slave every day in order to take care of our children and teach them. We must fight to secure our borders while at the same time refusing to steal children from their parents. And we must stand with those that come to this country legally, seeking a better life for them and their families, like my great-grandfather Agostino did from Italy almost 100 years ago. Now, if we are to be successful in each of these fights, it will require us to do something that some of you may resist. We must reach out to some Trump voters and we must welcome them home. Do I believe they were wrong in 2016? Absolutely. Do I believe that their choice has hurt millions of people and shattered America's standing in the world? Yes. But our challenge, the ongoing dumpster fire, and bring them back into our fold. Now that is going to be very hard for many of us because of what they have supported. That is going to be very critical because they run so counter to what many of us in this room believe. So today, let me propose a different way of thinking about these voters that we want to win back. Let me suggest that for our sake above all, because we need and we want to win, that we think of them not as evildoers, but as victims of a great con. Everyone in this room has been taken advantage of before. One thing I know from my work as an advocate is that decent people get conned all the time. And let's face it, Trump is a very good con man. He sold many of us a bill of goods. In the finest tradition of a snake oil salesman, he sold the perfect potion to many of us to cure all of our ails. Indeed, the farmers of rural Iowa, many of them were conned out of their votes only to now face potential financial ruin due to Trump's ego and his ridiculous trade policies. And with each passing day, he places more of our farmers' lives and livelihoods at risk. Hardworking folks simply trying to make us that need our help. These too are Davids that need to know that we understand. But tonight, let me also say this to those who voted for Trump. You see, Trump is hoping that millions of Americans fail to see the connection between their struggles and of others. This cruel and unusual president wouldn't be in power had he not convinced 2/3 of people that look like me that our success depended on trampling the dignity of women, people of color, African Americans, Muslims, immigrants, and so many others. And of course, he does this because he hopes that if we are whipped into hatred, we will forget all of his broken promises. We will forget all of those jobs that haven't come back, and we will forget about all of those farmers that are struggling. You see, too many of us in America have forgotten that old phrase, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Too many of us have a hard time putting ourselves in the shoes of those Trump is targeting. Too many of us fail to ask, if it were me, how would I want to be treated? Too many of us have been eerily silent, standing on the sidelines and allowing injustice to be done because they are not us. The vulnerable populations that Trump is targeting are presently fighting go I can remember that truth. If we can muster the will to fight, we can defeat President Trump's unusual cruelty. We can and will make the American dream real again. We will make America decent again. We will make America productive again. We will make America dynamic again. We will make America fair again.
So with that